Hayato from Zelda, the speed of Jojo. Like, that was crazy. What the heck was going on here? But, Rohan followed the rules and saved Luigi. But when it comes down to it, these things ignore her ability better than most characters that we've seen. So it's very possible that Alliance would be the majority of the standards that we know, as they don't abide by the normal laws of power that we understand too. Which is just completely wild and very polarizing. Number 7, next up, we have Fight the Dust versus the Mario World. Now, as a viewer, we're already somewhat on edge because of the So at this point, it was about seeing how much Fight the Dust was going to get to be so capable and how far it could truly get. I was extremely happy to see Hayato come into contact with the group, but you could feel the dread in that scene. Because how are you supposed to get help without revealing the identity of the person keeping this on? And what's so wild is that Hayato felt so helpless that the only way to get out of this and save everyone was to just end his whole life. But it's all misdirection because Bites the Dust never allowed him. While trying to save everyone from himself, Hayato accidentally contributes in being the one to show the call of power of Killer Queen's. Amazing. Amazing. Number 6, the Vanilla Ice introduction. The reveal of Vanilla Ice in the Stand Cream was also one for the books because seeing a minion of Dio that's so dedicated that he's willing to do that thing himself is one thing, but how he exited. I honestly, really speaking, I didn't think it was funny. I still do. But it was the next part that got me. We've never seen Alpha use this life protector ability before, but considering they just found Kenichi, who was hidden very well, makes you think, oh, well, okay, this probably can't get that bad. But Araki is just so amazing at its subtlety, because Alpha is the only person to find this writing, typically the only one who notices this enormous stand timing. And the fact that Alpha was just the one put into one of the worst possible situations could ever be in a JoJo. It was just so tense, it was unbelievable. And he saved his boys, but oh my god, he got straight up worse than the majority of his teams. If I could add more to this, I would. Because Vanilla Ice in its entirety is terrifying. But that's it. Number 5, we have Johnny Joestar versus Civil War. The battle between Johnny Joestar and the Stand Civil War is one of the most eerie and psychological battles that we have in this series. Now, Civil War used by Axl Rose isn't just about physical prowess at all, but it digs deep into the psyche of its opponents. The ability to materialize guilt into these apparitions, like these ghosts, forces its victims to confront their past sins and the weight of their regrets. So, Johnny's struggle becomes just so personal as you see the literal ghost of his past haunt him, and then some more. But not only does it tear him up mentally, it goes on to do the same thing physically. It's a type of body horror that's reminiscent of Chakalada, again, Alliance, and it added so much more weight to the entire fight. So I'm very thankful that it existed at a time where Steel Ball is insane. At number 4, G winning. This situation has easily been one of the most fear-instilling moments in all of JoJo. All of JoJo. Because Gucci's complete massacre of the Stone Ocean cast is one of the most polarizing things to happen to an entire cast of characters. Making have it in its design isn't a scary one like at all. But the fact that it's Gucci of all the characters is what's truly scary. Because he's finally got to everything that he did. But originally speaking, when I was first reading this, I thought this was going to play out like one part. Or maybe, like the other attack. Awakened Demon and fights of this. But this was completely different. So you couldn't do everything. And there was no defense whatsoever against it. You know what was also incredibly terrifying? When we saw Gucci moving in stopped time, just then you get on to the thing together and stop time damn near because she has covered it all. He knows how to get around this. He's been slash, slice, turn all of the characters. Of course. She already knew that she fighters weapon. But I didn't think it was going to go on. That's never happened. Jojo screamed terror for the first time. I've heard it yelling, but here's the thing. Seeing everyone and everything crumble before our eyes is just completely shocking. And obviously, this isn't the glorious thing that's happened to Jojo, but being fully honest was truly scary and surpassed things like Pokemon. Trust me, I've seen over 1,000-something movies locked out in letterbox. So trust me, gore is not what it's not the main thing about scary movies. Number 30, we have Rats and the Rats. Confrontation with Stan Rats, bug eating and all that, whatever. Rats' horrific ability is what takes the spot on this third spot. Because this moment stands out as one of the most monstrous, just unsettling things that's ever happened. Because when Jotaro and Josuke coming through to face this rat, they're greeted with the sight of a man and his wife melting, reshaped, and stuck inside of a fridge. The image of his disfigured body, like they're just these futile beings just held, trying to just, oh my god, it's like some berserk stuff. It's creating this hard to shake off scene. And the idea that your body can be transformed into this unrecognizable state of being while you're still alive and conscious, that reminds me a lot of those Chrono Trigger movies, which I have also watched. And I watched it. So nowadays, when I see a rat of sorts, I try not to remember that scene as an intrusive thought. And for number 2, this is the last of our part 4 mentioned list, Kira's invasion and attack. Because Kira has a bad encounter with a couple other people. His intent is at an all-time high. Because he's been playing it safe for so long now, and as soon as I see the couple again, I knew right then. I was like, okay, it is JoJo. Like, Kira catches the door, forces his way into their home, and as soon as the maiden tries to say anything to Kira, horrifying. Raw. Horrifying. This torment of the woman also is just another spectacle, because you see how sadistic Kira is in his enjoyment of all this. It's terrible. He goes as far to pin and severed ears, still attached to his earrings, onto her, before getting nothing of her but a severed. I also want to add in the fact that I was and I swear, I thought he was done. I was like, I get to talk. But yeah, great moment. I'm happy that we wrapped up this character. And let's get on to the honorable mentions. Now, here are some honorable mentions that I can say.
Oh, hi.
There's Santana, to a face. I always thought that was live. She's body for sure. Angelo showing how adamant he is on I feel like it's lastly, I think so.
Oh god, it's raining.
Oh! And lastly, spinning it all the way
yeah, like
Neo, now a vampire, mother desperate to escape her child, begs Neo to take her life and spare True is the fate. And she's lost all sense of mind, all sense of she ends up devouring. I know it's a bit dumb to say that this is where I realized that, but I truly believe that this is the final nail. Like, there's a couple nails, to be fair, there is not a single shred of humanity left. I gotta believe there's a bunch of stuff that just gets like hasty and all that type of stuff, but no. It was all gone. You also know I especially considering that Araki had actually drawn this out in the manga, and it looks as crazy as you can imagine. Yeah, that's definitely my thing. So if you have an idea of your own take, please feel free to leave it in the comments. How do we do what my favorite holiday memories? I'm on the horror, or the genre that there is. back on this before dwelling on next year and all that. And yeah, thank you all for watching. Support all so much. Hopefully, I'll see you on the next one. Until then, peace out.
And welcome back to the Minecraft Survival Guide.
My
Hope you're all
ancient
having
core
a good
was
day.
there.
In today's episode, we're going to start off by unpacking some of the stuff that we brought back from that chunk that we mined out and the ancient city. We've got a bunch of books in here, some of which I want to apply to various things. We've got Unbreaking to put on this hoe, which I've now freshly prepared, and we have a bunch of Swift Sneak books, and we're going to put Swift Sneak 3 on my current set of diamond leggings. All of the ore blocks that we brought back from that chunk are just going to go straight into the storage system, since all of the ores will be sorted by the ore section that I have already down there. So I'm just going to throw all of this in here. We're going to do that manually so that the shulker box will be freed up, and the system down there is sorting the most common sets of ores, so I'm fairly certain that stuff like the deep slate coal ore is going to end up in our overflow chest, but I might reposition that over there once this is done sorting through everything and we can put this shulker box back away. Now let's go to our enchanting setup, and we've got an anvil up there with which we should be able to imbue some of our existing gear with this brand new set of enchantments we've got. So that hoe can finally have Unbreaking, and aside from needing efficiency 5, that is a pretty decent hoe at this point. We've got Mending and Unbreaking 3 on there, so that's going to last the longest the tool possibly can. And we need to remove our leggings to get hold of Swift Sneak 3, which is going to be fairly expensive, but definitely worthwhile. I explained the way Swift Sneak works in the previous episode, but just to catch you folks up, the way this works is that if you're walking around normally when you sneak, you take a little bit of a decrease in speed. So, for example, without these leggings on, I'm sneaking a lot slower than I would be walking or sprinting. With Swift Sneak on, however, it doesn't reduce your movement speed nearly as much when you sneak. Here is the difference between me walking around. You can see my arm bobbing up and down like that, and now I'm sneaking. My arm is still, and I'm moving at more or less the same speed. Now, one of the other fun aspects of this is that if you are sprinting before you start sneaking, your sneak speed is faster than it normally would be from a walking sneak. So you can actually tech this a little bit. You can end up jumping between sneaks and still gliding around like this a little bit faster than you would otherwise. And I'm not sure if this is still the case, but thanks to a weird combination of Minecraft physics, Swift Sneaking on a diagonal might actually be faster than sprinting in that direction. It certainly feels very fast, but we're going to be Swift Sneaking from now on thanks to these fancy new leggings I've acquired, and I don't know, I think I'll get used to it after a while, but it's always one of those things like Death Strider, where if you not had Death Strider for a while and then you get it again, you suddenly have to get used to getting faster in water. But having Swift Sneak is actually going to be really useful for us today, because we're going to do a little bit of building. In fact, we're going to keep with the scary theme, but a little bit outside the box of just scary monster fight and scary Minecraft features. Today, we're going to be building with scary blocks. I've had this mud farm set up for a while, but it's looked very bare bones out here in the open, and I want to turn this into a sort of mud factory. I can also make a couple of quick changes to the way this works mechanically speaking, because I figure we can put a hopper minecart in the top here to avoid any issues with the glass bottles inside of this dispenser being spat out in a weird angle. And thankfully we have a hopper minecart left over from our Elaine clock setup, so we're just going to use that up the top here. We're going to put the rail on top of this hopper, and since rails can be waterlogged, that's absolutely no problem. The only other thing we need to do to this farm is make sure that it's got enough glass bottles in leaving one stack empty so that the water bottles end up being retained by this dispenser. Now we've got decent trade connections and plenty of sand converted to glass. So the task that remains is to build blocks that you're scared of, and that's one of the top approaches in this series, is why people like and dislike certain types of blocks. I think it really comes down to neutrality and usability for the most part. Like, if you think about these grey range of blocks here, like stone, for example. Stone has a very neutral, it doesn't have anything that really gives it that high contrast, stand-out texture the way something like cobblestone. So it's very easy to build large stuff out of stone. I mean, you see it all of the time in terrain around here, and the terrain never looks like it stands out, like it never looks too busy, because it's all sculpted out of natural material like stone. On the other hand, if you apply the texture like cobblestone to every stone block in the game, it would look incredibly busy and might be a little bit harsh on the eyes. This amount of contrast in the texture of cobblestone, players don't tend to build entire walls out of cobblestone if they want something nice, because it doesn't really leave anywhere for the eye to rest. You're looking at a lot of busy texture, and that actually tends to tire the eyes out of. But despite that, peppering a little bit of cobblestone into a wall like this can add some texture to the wall and imply that there are different materials at play here, that the wall is just made out of stone. Or alternatively, it can imply something a little bit like how cartoonists and illustrators use texture. Just add a little bit of it, and it tricks the brain into thinking that entire wall is probably made out of that material, but they've just chosen to pepper in a couple of details for examples. The other thing about grey is that it's a neutral colour, kind of similar to black and white. It can be paired with a lot of things without clashing, without creating
that's even better.
uncomfortable looking combinations of colours. Like if you were to build an entire house out of red and green material, or out of orange and cyan material, those colours clash quite a lot, and you'd end up with something that felt a little bit too cartoonish in the case of red and green, probably evoking that kind of Christmas palette, but orange and cyan next to each other all over the place takes a very specific type of build in order to pull that off. If you're looking to build a naturalistic house like this, you're probably not going to want to build it out of orange and cyan materials. But there are some materials that, historically speaking, players don't always get on with, and I'm looking specifically at materials like granite and diorite. People don't like these materials because they have a little bit of a busy texture. The clean calcite here that we have alongside the diorite feels a lot nicer to look at. It's kind of the diorite actual stone, where the diorite is closer to something like cobblestone in terms of how busy the texture is, how many light areas and dark areas there are, creating contrast within the texture of that block. With granite, the texture is a little bit contrasty. There are some darker and lighter areas in this, but I think the main thing people dislike about granite is that
I'm so upset.
non-committal, sickly kind of pinkish orange. It doesn't really stand out as an accent colour, but it's difficult to have it work together with other blocks in the block palette because there are very few materials that really harmonise with this kind of colour. And those that do either create even more contrast, like right here where I've got it next to dripstone. Dripstone kind of has a slightly more purpley tinge to it than granite, but it's a warmer set of colours. It's kind of warmer, drier type of material, and but this texture looks very different to that texture. They are both very distinct. They're both kind of noisy in their own way, where dripstone is kind of streaky in a horizontal way. Granite feels more practical. Yeah. Then again, if you compare granite to terracotta, if you look at these two textures, they're fairly similar in colour. The terracotta has such a background detail, even though there is a little bit of texture in there as it's closer. But that has such a plain texture from a distance compared to the granite, which is always going to stand out. So it can be a little bit difficult to find places in which to use granite, and that is why granite remains one of the blocks that I probably use the least out of the entire Minecraft block palette. To Today we are going to change that. We're going to change it by using granite as one of several colours in a gradient for the walls of our mud block factory. See, this all ties in together. We're also going to spend some time with one of my other favourite blocks in the game, and that is, surprisingly, the bricks block. And I think brick blocks are actually the perfect choice to put in the build around a mud factory for a couple of reasons. First of all, brick blocks to me really represent that kind of old school factory style building that there are a lot of in the UK. Mills and workshops and stuff that was built around the era of the Industrial Revolution here in the UK. And you find bricks like this in a great deal of UK houses because we have a lot of clay. And having access to materials like this naturally means that we can create a lot of building materials using them. But the problem I always had with the Minecraft brick texture, even after they refined some of these textures back in the 1.14 update, is that it's so plain. Every brick in this texture is exactly the same. It will take a couple of pixels here and there, but for the most part, all the bricks are the same colour, they have basically the same shading, and that's not really how bricks are in the real world. Maybe if a brand new build has been put down and the bricks are fresh and new, and it's like a new residential area that they want to have nice and clean and look to it, you'll find that a lot of those bricks look the same. But bricks in a building that's been there for longer than maybe a year or two will start to develop their own character. They'll develop different colour as they age, the elements of them. And that is not present at all in the default Minecraft brick texture. Some people get around this by developing a resource pack or using somebody else's resource pack that changes up the colours of bricks and makes it a little bit more randomised, but that doesn't necessarily jive with my way of working. So I want to make the blocks of the default resource pack look good in the builds that I make. That's part of the challenge of Minecraft. That's part of the puzzle. And so the way I want to make bricks look good is by pairing them with other materials. Instead of putting the gradient in the roof of this build, we're going to be putting it into the wall and making the roof plain so that, as I said before, the eye has somewhere to rest. When your walls are going to be this colourful, you want to have something a bit neutral. But if you look at granite and bricks side by side, they are not exactly the same colour the granite is. Lighter, it's a little bit pale. There's not quite the contrast that the bricks have, and it's obviously much less structured of a block. If you put blocks of bricks side by side, the mortar in between the bricks lines up the bricks themselves, continue on over into the next block. If you throw a piece of granite in there, it really doesn't look like
I'm
it
using
should work
this.
very
I'm
well.
using
And one of the mysteries of Minecraft
the
building, one
online
of the things that
save
makes this a little
editor.
bit strange, is
I
that
earned
a
those
single
fucking
wall of
cores.
bricks like this can look relatively bland, whereas if you start to pepper in a little bit of granite, maybe we'll do this along one edge like so, and have some of the granite feel like the bricks have worn down and it's maybe been patched up with other building materials and some filler has been put in over time. Suddenly you find that this wall takes on a bit of its own character. And if we fly away from this and look at it from a distance, the colours will start to merge into one overall colour. It's kind of difficult to demonstrate this when obviously this is going to look really small for you folks watching the video, but the way this brick wall appears from a distance, it sort of like merges all of the colours together. So despite the fact that those materials look like they clash so much up close, at a distance they start to look like a harmonious piece of the same chunk of material, basically. And that's what we're going to be doing with this factory wall. We're going to have some granite and brick next to each other, accompanied by a bunch of other textures, and you'll be interested to see what actually stands out when all's said and done. And at the same time, we get to use two blocks that I've never really liked all that much and turn them into a build that I am pretty certain I'm going to enjoy. So here's the plan. We brought back a bunch of moss from that moss mining chunk that we did over there in the mountain biome, and I want to use a bunch of this to kind of blend this build in with the surroundings. But how do we get from this, the moss block over here, to this, where we've got the bricks and we've got the granite? How do we bridge the gap between these two without making it look like the Christmas colour palette I mentioned? How do we stop green and red from clashing this much? The answer, of course, is to throw in some sort of gradient, and we're going to work with a combination of blocks that both share some colours with these, but also share some thematic parallels, or at least some material parallels. The first of those is going to be mossy cobblestone. And gosh, is this all the cobblestone I have? Okay, I need to do some more mining apparently, because mossy cobblestone is a vital bridge between the green and grey palettes, because of course moss and mossy cobblestone are going to go together quite nicely. In addition to that, I think tuff is a really great block to use alongside mossy cobblestone, because it starts to bridge into that grey colour palette even further, while still having a couple of those darker areas that feel a little bit greener or yellower in the texture, and that really helps to blend between these materials without looking like it's kind of unnatural. Where the shift really comes in though is in the copper colour palette, which right now we don't have a huge amount of additional copper around, so we're probably going to have to lay out some of this in order for it to oxidize. And really the best way to do that is to make sure the copper blocks are spaced 4 blocks apart, so they have 4 blocks in between each of these 2 blocks, and on every 5th block you're placing another block of copper. Of course, make sure it's not waxed before you do this. It will say waxed in the item name, or you can right-click it with an X, just tap it once to make sure that the wax has been removed if there was any in the first place. And actually, the more copper you leave out to age like this, the faster you will find a single block that ages. So we're going to grab one of those, we're going to leave the rest of these to age a couple more stages, and I'm going to find my stone cutter, because the stone cutter is vital for turning copper blocks into some of their variants, of which we are getting a lot more in the next update, so stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, if you want cut copper, you can get 4 blocks of it from a single block of copper in a stone cutter, whereas if you use a crafting interface, you're putting 4 blocks in to get 4 blocks out. Back in the stone cutter, if you put 4 blocks in, you'd be getting 16 blocks out, so naturally the cut copper from the stone cutter is going to be a lot more value per block than it is crafting it in a crafting table. That's really one of the golden rules of working with copper, is that you should always cut your copper in a stone cutter. Now a couple more of these blocks are transforming before our very eyes, so we're going to wait for one of those to get to the weathered stage, from this exposed colour to the weathered colour. And while it's doing that, we're going to get hold of some vines. Even if you don't have a jungle or a swamp nearby, vines can be pretty easy to farm. You've just got to bring 4 saplings for jungle trees out here, bone meal those until the tree grows if you can't wait for it to grow naturally, and they'll generate with a ton of vines on that you can then shear off. Vines will also allow you to craft mossy cobblestone if you want to, but we're going to use them to ease the transition between the...
Here we go. We're gonna get it, Jack! I hate this so much! Hold that! Sam, go away!
I think I can get a piece of tingle clothing around here.
radical movement was already happening. David Attenborough said that her book changed the scientific world the most behind only Darwin's Origin of Species, and it opened up the floodgates not only on exposing problems in the environment, but rushing to fix them. Also in 1968, ecologist Garrett Hardin published The Tragedy of the Commons, which tapped the metaphor of a public, unregulated plot of land used rationally by individuals to the point of total obliteration. Hardin wrote, "Freedom in a commons brings ruin to all." And the message was that left to our own devices, we were going to destroy everything. Modifying human behavior is hard. The simplest solution was restricting the ability to make humans at all. And if we didn't do it ourselves, nature would end up doing it for us. In the 1969 essay Eco-Catastrophe, Ehrlich wrote that the shape of the population growth curve is one familiar to biologists, because like butterflies who interact with and depend on their environment, populations swell and shrink based on what that environment can provide. He called it the outbreak crash sequence, in which populations rise in times of abundance and crash or completely disappear when that abundance stops. A year later, he wrote in Audubon that we've had most of the outbreak, what remains is mainly the crash. The world population at that time was 3.7 billion and growing at a steady 2% per year, which put it on pace to reach 7 billion in 50 years. Malthus had already outlined two types of interventions to diffuse what would eventually become Ehrlich's population model: preventative checks and positive checks. A preventative check is an act that controls population by reducing fertility rates, deciding not to have kids, limiting the number of children parents can have, like China's former one-child policy, and the wider availability of both contraception and abortion. A positive check is actually not that positive.
Hey,
it's something that
it's the one. It's the thing everyone uses
war,
for
disease, famine, or murder. It can be an active or
cheating
passive depopulator, and you might be surprised at how many academics were happy to beat out misery in the name of eco-justice. In their 1967 book, Famine 1975, authors William and Paul Paddock proposed that the United States should limit its foreign food aid based on the social behavior of countries with growing populations. They categorized Egypt and India as can't be safe, so no food for them. Pakistan scored higher. Paddock thought they did deserve some food. And the idea to withhold food in an effort to encourage or really punish behavior was typified by President Lyndon Johnson's decision not to send food aid to India during the Bihar famine of 1966. He told an advisor, "I'm not going to piss away foreign aid in nations that refuse to deal with their own population problems." Ehrlich supported food punishment. He said, "I've been citing Paddock's work in all my recent talks on the population crisis, and he called food punishment coercion for a good cause, because India was, quote, hopeless." It was India that actually inspired Ehrlich to start thinking deeply about the population bomb. He had traveled to Delhi in 1965 with his family, and what he saw was like a reboot of London in the time of Malthus. My wife and daughter and I were returning to our hotel in an ancient castle. The seats were hopping with fleas. The only functional gear was third. As we crawled through the city and entered a crowded slum area, the temperature was well over 100 and the air was a haze of dust and smoke. The streets seemed alive with people. People eating, people watching, people sleeping, people visiting, arguing and screaming, people thrusting their hands through the taxi window, begging, people defecating and urinating, people clinging to buses, people herding animals, people. As we moved slowly through the mob, hand horns squawking, the dust, noise, heat, and cooking fires gave the scene a hellish aspect. Ehrlich knew that something had to be done. 65 years ago, Leonard Read detailed the seemingly impossible global operation that led to the creation of a single and smoothly everything involved in production. Growing it on in the cedar, finding the graphite, truck drivers all yell away, and on house of miles. And their animated Common Sense Soapbox channel reveals how the world really works. You can also check out Invisible Hands, a crash course in economics hosted by me. Thanks to the Foundation for Economic Education for supporting this video. Click the link to their YouTube channel in the description below. If you can handle unique analysis of complex systems of human behavior, throw them a sub. Coercion wasn't on the table for Ehrlich and his colleagues, based on a tenet that parents did not have a natural right to have children in the first place. He toyed with a worldwide limit of 2 children per set of parents. Martin agreed, saying, the freedom to...
If we're looking to reduce fertility rates, an easy way to do that would be to just legalize same-sex marriage.
Because trying to control people by force would hurt.
I'll come up with any excuse to make that legal throughout all of
whatever
Earth.
steps are necessary to establish a reasonable population size in the United States. The Department of Population
Although allowing something,
that could fund
especially if
research
said thing is same-sex marriage, I doubt will do anything.
Forced sterilization
about the population.
was an option for him, and so was introducing temporary infertility agents in public drinking water. He said that humanity will wake up one day to find that compulsory birth control offers the only hope of survival. Some of his allies became increasingly nervous about the implications of Ehrlich's more radical ideas, including members of the group he founded called Zero Population Group, which still exists, now called Population Connection, when they realized that the targets of their global sterilization efforts were not going to be well-educated, well-off white people. But Ehrlich wasn't the only one sounding the alarm on a grand scale. 100 politicians, diplomats, economists, and business leaders had founded that
Allowing same-sex marriage probably will affect the population growth 0%. That's probably the one reason it's still not going to be allowed, even if it is used as an argument.
Industrialization, pollution, and consumption of non-renewable natural resources. They called for an absolute halt to economic growth, warning that without it, industrial production would collapse, population would suffer a catastrophic decline, and the air, sea, and land would be polluted beyond redemption. The right time to intervene wasn't today, it was actually yesterday, because the collapse will not come gradually, but with awesome suddenness, with no way of stopping. The movement's most radical ideas became reality in India as part of a forced sterilization program in 1975. The BBC described the initiative. The drive to sterilize began in the 1970s when, encouraged by loans amounting to tens of billions of dollars from the World Bank, the Swedish International Development Authority, and the UN Population Fund, India embarked on an ambitious population control program. During the 1975 emergency, when civil liberties were suspended, Sanjay Gandhi, son of the former Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, began what was described by many as a gruesome campaign to sterilize poor men. There were reports of police cordoning off villages and virtually dragging the men to surgery. 6.5 million Indian men were sterilized in 1 year, which was 15 times more than the Nazis sterilized, and about 2,000 of those men died from surgical complications. In the Population Bombs chapter called What Needs to Be Done, Ehrlich writes, when we suggested sterilizing all Indian males with 3 or more children, he should have encouraged the Indian government to go ahead with the plan. We, the United States, should have volunteered logistic support in the form of helicopters, vehicles, and surgical instruments. We should have sent doctors to aid in the program by setting up centers for training paramedical personnel to do vasectomies. Coercion? Perhaps, but coercion in a good cause. His priority was to systemically eliminate the world's fastest growing populations, which were almost exclusively poor and non-white. Even in his days of population concern, Julian Simon had a soft
I don't think people get the wrong idea.
He argued that avoiding a birth cost the developing nation about $5, and that it would save 114, which he called a fantastic bargain, and proposed offering benefits to families not to have children as a mutually agreeable preventative check. His ideals rewarded people for their choices instead of sterilizing them against their will. But Simon eventually started to realize that people don't work like butterflies. When he studied family dynamics and their economic rationalism, he found that increased income drove different behaviors among families. Small families used additional money to have larger families, and larger families didn't. Education levels had a marked effect on reproduction, and still do. If you look to works from Simon Pestlitz and Richard Easter, who concluded that the larger population means more creators and innovators, and Esther Moser's work that showed population density determines the type and scale of agricultural production and its efficiency. Simon realized that population growth was a lot more complex than Ehrlich made it out to be, and not simply subject to the conceptual human impact equation that Ehrlich created, which was impact equals population times affluence times technology. IPAT. But Ehrlich was the guy everyone wanted to talk to. He was young, attractive, and highly charismatic.
She doesn't look that good.
Unlike most rednecks. He was really funny and likable as he detailed humanity's impending doom, which is why he was a guest on The Tonight Show over 20 times. Here he is with Johnny Carson talking about why he thinks the benefit of a growing population just isn't really there.
Why don't we try doing a really good job with 4 billion people, see if we can do that. After we get 4 billion people well taken care of in a clean environment, good health, and everybody's fed, and everybody has opportunities and so on, then we can say, gee, all right, maybe we can do it 5. What would be the advantage of 5? Well, there would be another 500 million women, for instance, which I would find.
You like that?
Yeah, right, but I just soon have the 4 billion taken care of right first.
I think left you out, maybe you're right. Good show. Ehrlich was masterful at presenting the science of demographics and environmental impact in moral and emotional terms. Do you want kids to starve? Well, no. Do you want to perpetuate human suffering? No. Do you want to see the destruction of Earth's human race and all plant and animal life? No, probably not. And preventive guilt, especially among high consumption societies like the United States and Western Europe, is your standard of living worth the price the rest of the world pays? With that, Paul Saban writes that Ehrlich's brand of rhetoric played a significant part in whipping up a Malthusian fervor. He points to a review of Ehrlich's 1970 book, Population, Resources, Environment, Issues, and Human Ecology, by Roger Remmel, who founded Harvard's Center for Population Studies, that highlights Ehrlich's use of incendiary language. Staggering, sobering, disastrous, enormously, drastically, catastrophic, dramatically, tremendous, highly lethal, extremely dangerous twice, especially virulent, or severe, extremely fortunate, extremely vulnerable, almost total, high potential, greatly effective, not gruesome enough, colossal hazard, biological doomsday, super lethal, and disastrously effective. Riddle noted what he called apocalyptic adverbs and adjectives because that list I just said appeared in only 4 pages out of a book of 300. Ehrlich had become a celebrity on TV, was writing in Playboy, and Julian Simon was not happy. The 70s brought a series of energy crises, starting with the 1978 oil embargo that resulted in a 43% increase in the price of gas. Gas rationing in California based on license plate numbers
from
and
dealing 20 to
serious
25
fears about
damage
dependence on
of
fossil fuels. So Ehrlich was looking pretty smart, but Simon insisted that population growth and its global problems should thrill rather than frighten us. How? How could he look at a world in crisis and possibly think that? Simon had spent the 70s writing about all the reasons the Ehrlich-style doomsayers were wrong. Wrong about their models, wrong about humans, and really just wrong about the way the whole world works. And he was writing, seemingly, to no one. In a 1997 interview with Wired titled The Doomslayer, he said seeing Ehrlich tout such
Doomslayer.
Here was a guy reaching a vast audience, leading this juggernaut of environmentalist hysteria, and I felt utterly helpless. What could I do? Go talk to 5 people? Well, the truth of the matter is, even those 5 people didn't want to hear that between 1800 and 1980, the price of wheat in the United States dropped precipitously, despite the population growing by about 4,500%. It didn't matter that Simon found that population did not actually increase geometrically, and birth rates have even begun to fall in developed countries, including the low replacement rate, which is the minimum number of babies born to maintain current levels of population. In 1950, global life expectancy was 45. By 1980, it was 61, and that happened due to better medicine, better technology, greater food production, and greater wealth. That's about a 35% longer life in 30 years. All his frustration led to an article that brought Simon and his optimism into the international debate over humanity's future. In the June 27, 1980 issue of Science, Simon published Resources, Population, Environment, an oversupply of false bad news. Introductory summary says it all. False bad news about population growth, natural resources, and the environment is published widely in the face of contradictory evidence. For example, the world supply of arable land has actually been increasing. The scarcity of natural resources, including food and energy, has been decreasing. And basic measures of U.S. environmental quality show positive trends. Aggregate data show no long-run negative effect of population growth upon standard of living. Models that embody forces omitted in the past, especially the influence of population size upon productivity increase, suggest a long-run positive effect of additional people. Simon completely decimated claims that arable land had decreased worldwide. Instead, he noted that cultivated land was rising at 1% per year. He showed that farmers in industrialized nations were producing more food on less land. As populations grew, people were getting better at farming, and technology was making it cheaper and easier with fewer people involved. To the charge that the world increasingly struggled with food, Simon showed that per capita food production had also grown at about 1% per year. Now, it wasn't good news. Yay, cotton candy and sunshine all around, and it never will be. Simon was honest about that, but he made the distinction that the food problems in vulnerable countries were overwhelmingly the result of restricted markets, war, and political instability. He called out the New York Times, the United Nations, the World Bank, and, of course, Ehrlich. And he lamented the reliance on faulty computer models that delivered grim and ultimately wrong projections about our future. He concluded that population growth and productivity increase are not independent forces running a race. Rather, additional persons cause technological advances by inventing, adapting, and diffusing new productive knowledge. He also wasn't the first to challenge Malthus and Ehrlich on these grounds, and he had some unexpected allies throughout history. Karl Marx called Malthus a plagiarist, a sycophant, and a reverend
A sycophant?
And Engels
Of what?
refuted Malthus's concept of nature's inevitable processes, writing that the determining factor in history is the production and
But that's
reproduction
a pretty
of the
savage.
immediate essentials of life. Marx and Engels saw the solution in a tightly controlled collectivism that would eventually become communism, while Simon pointed to the power of freedom and markets. But they all believed that the way we organize society can address population problems that seem hopeless, but aren't. Economist Henry George stated the difference most simply in his 1879 Progress and Poverty, saying, "Both the jayhawk and the man eat chickens, but the more jayhawks, the fewer chickens, while the more men, the more chickens." Monarch butterflies eat nectar produced from flowering plants. If there's not enough nectar to support the monarch butterfly population, some of them die until it reaches a sustainable level. But if humans have restricted access to a particular resource, like corn or something, or it becomes too expensive, we can just use something else. Simon argued that humanity has two superpowers: adaptability and innovation. We can invent, we can improve, and we can substitute, all of which constitute less of a threat to resources than Ehrlich thought. Because to Simon, those finite resources aren't nearly as finite as they seem. He used copper as an example, saying that we can't calculate future quantities of copper because new lodes, new methods of mining copper, and variations in grades of copper lodes, because copper can be made from other metals, and because of the vagueness of the boundaries within which copper might be found, including the sea and other planets. And even less possible is a reasonable calculation of the amount of future services of the sort we are now accustomed to get from copper because of recycling and because of the substitution of other materials for copper, as in the case of the communications satellite. Translation, we are good at finding more, we're getting more efficient at extracting it, we're using it more smartly, and how we use it now doesn't
Smartly is the
have
word.
any bearing on how we'll use it in the future if we use it at all. Simon wrote in Science that we have so much bad news about the world because that's where the funding is for researchers, and that late night talk shows don't have guests who talk about everything getting better. But he also said that the cumulative nature of exponential growth models have the power to seduce and bewitch, especially because so many people compare the present with the potential future, idealized or awful, instead of comparing the present to the past. Simon and his growing rank of optimists were derided as adhering to cornucopianism, referencing the Greek mythological horn of abundance that produced food and never ran out. Ehrlich said Simon was like the guy who jumps off the Empire State Building and says how great things are going so far as he passes the 10th floor. Ehrlich insisted that not only did we have finite resources, but that we were using them up fast, while Simon was effectively arguing that resources were endless. And it didn't help that he wrote that humanity's only real limit was the theoretical total weight of the universe. To Ehrlich, we were doomed. To Simon, humans not only have the capacity to address our problems, but that we come out even better than before we had them. It's kind of a big difference. So the battle lines had been finally drawn. It was time to make a wager on the future of the human race. It was time to bet. In Social Science Quarterly, Simon said he'd like to take that bet with Ehrlich about England still existing 20 years on. But instead, he proposed to stake $10,000 on my belief that the cost of non-government controlled raw materials, including grain and oil, will not rise in the long run. Simon said that Ehrlich could choose any bonded raw materials he wanted. Simon left it up to him, and that they would track the prices of each commodity over the course of 10 years. On September 29, 1980, Ehrlich agreed to a reduced wager of $1,000, putting 200 bucks into each of 5 resources he and his colleagues had predicted would rise in price over the coming decade: copper, chromium, nickel, tin, and tungsten. If the inflation-adjusted prices went up, Simon would pay Ehrlich their difference in values between 1980 and 1990. If their prices went down, Simon would win the bet and Ehrlich would pay the difference. Copper has been used in various capacities for over 10,000 years, from primitive tools to modern conductors. Chromium is a component to stainless steel, and it's why your dad's wrenches and motor don't rust. Nickel is one of 4 ferromagnetic elements. We use it now in the rechargeable batteries of electric vehicles. Tin is important for alloys and plating, which is why plated steel cans were referred to as tin cans. Tungsten is extremely hard and dense. It's necessary in X-ray tubes and welding. These 5 materials presented a cross-section of nature and human activity that Ehrlich was convinced would force demand and scarcity to collide. 1980 saw a dramatic policy shift in the United States under Ronald Reagan, who advocated for a freer market in line with Simon's optimism. Fears about endangered species became forms of ozone layer threatened to increase exposure to ultraviolet radiation, and the Exxon Valdez oil spill dominated the news at the end of the decade. The threat of nuclear war still loomed, and a nuclear disaster in Chernobyl came 7 years after 3 Mile Island. So things did not seem awesome. But on September 29, 1990, it was time for someone to pay out. In 1980, the price of chromium was $3.90 per pound. In 1990, it was $3.70. Tin dropped by half, from $8.72 to $3.88. 3 of the 5 metals had gone down in price despite inflation. The other 2 both fell in inflation-adjusted terms. Simon won the bet on all 5 of the chosen metals. More importantly to him, Ehrlich and his doomsday philosophy lost. In October of 1990, a check from Wells Fargo Bank in the amount of $576.07 arrived in Julian Simon's mailbox. There was no note, and the check was signed by Anne Ehrlich, Paul's wife. In his book, The Ultimate Resource, Julian Simon wrote, "Adding more people causes problems, but people are also the means to solve these problems. The main fuel to speed the world's progress is our stock of knowledge. The brakes are our lack of imagination and unsound social regulations of these activities. The ultimate resource is people, especially skilled, spirited, and hopeful young people endowed with liberty, who will exert their wills and imaginations for their own benefits, and so inevitably will they benefit the rest of us as well." It was truly a triumph of hope and optimism over doom and gloom. Or did Julian Simon just get lucky? A 2009 paper called Luck or Skill, an examination of the Ehrlich-Simon bet, reveals that had the bet been run one more time from 1990 to 2000, Simon would have triumphed again. And had the wager taken place for any of the possible 98 10-year periods between 1900 and 2007, Ehrlich would have won 61.2% of the time. So, maybe Ehrlich was right. Actually, the data shows a massive crash in commodities prices following World War I, which means they spent the rest of the century slowly rising back to their former levels, creating an artificial bias towards Ehrlich's rising prices theory and proving Simon's point about the power of human cooperation, or in the case of a world war, the lack of cooperation, to determine how we use and value resources. It's really easy to look at the results of the Ehrlich-Simon wager and scoff at the loser, and it's even easier to revisit failed doomsday predictions of a disappearing England and worldwide famine killing billions and laugh at how wrong it all is. It's much harder to understand why those predictions happen in the first place and why it's completely natural to think everything is bad and getting worse. It's why the doomsayers are so seductive and popular, and why the doomslayers aren't just ignored, they are hated. In 2016, Swedish physician Hans Rosling was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. He began writing back to list 10 reasons we're wrong about the world as what he called his last battle in my lifelong mission to fight devastating ignorance. It was published in 2018, a year after he died. Rosling detailed 10 human instincts that conspire to convince us that the world is forever going in the wrong direction, which can inform devastatingly wrong reactions to our problems. The first is the gap instinct, which is to consider the differences between the top and the bottom rather than focusing on the majority, or whether all levels of society are improving in spite of relative differences. And he argues that our negative instinct programs us not to bother noticing improvements at all. Our straight line instinct causes us to assume that our current trends will continue exactly as they are right now, rather than accelerating or decelerating. And our fear instinct distorts our perception of risk to make us overvalue possible negatives. Our size instinct makes us feel overwhelmed by the sheer scale of a problem, as our generalization instinct lumps all our problems together as being equally threatening. And our destiny instinct makes us feel like none of our problems ever get solved, even though they tend to get better slowly. Our single perspective instinct hyper-focuses on just one possible solution, rather than considering many solutions that work in combination. And our blame instinct makes us focus on the bad guys who we are convinced are responsible for the problem. But the most threatening might be the urgency instinct, which drives us to feel that there's impending catastrophe if we don't do something immediately, rather than one step at a time. Only a single comma separates do something stupid from do something stupid. Ehrlich may have been 0 for 5 on his bet with Julian Simon, but he's 10 for 10 with Rosling's checklist of insatiable pathologies. Paul Ehrlich is now in his 90s, and he's vibrant, energetic, and still insisting that he's right, or that he was never really that wrong. In January of this year, Ehrlich tweeted after being featured on 60 Minutes that if I'm always wrong, so is science, since my work is always peer-reviewed, including the population bomb, and I've gotten virtually every scientific honor. Sure, I've made some mistakes, but no basic ones. Elon Musk disagreed. In June, he said Paul Ehrlich has done immense damage to humanity. Immense. I despise him. In April of 2023, Ehrlich gave an interview at Stanford in which he said he wouldn't deny anyone the opportunity to have children, but that
if you have 10 children, you're an evil person trying to basically destroy the world.
The birth rate in Somalia is 7.5 times higher than in South Korea, but it isn't clear whether Ehrlich thinks Somalians are 7.5 times more evil. In 1981, the year after the Ehrlich-Simon wager, the year in which Simon's The Ultimate Resource came out, 88% of the population of China lived in extreme poverty. Deng Xiaoping's market reforms then fueled tremendous economic growth and an increased standard of living. China's extreme poverty rate today is under 1%. There are no longer any restrictions on reproduction, and China has more billionaires than any country in the world.
Darn right they do.
Average daily caloric intake globally was 2,487. Today, it's 2,928. In India, it rose from 1,994 50 years ago to
Willing to bet at least double
2,137.
digits if those are cost from gacha games.
We now have a new problem of consuming too many calories. Life expectancy globally was just 61 years in 1980. Today, it's about 73. In 2022, about 630,000 people worldwide died from AIDS-related illnesses, down 69% from about 2 million per year just 20 years ago. And you'll now find TV commercials for competing combination antiretroviral drugs that reduce the HIV virus to undetectable levels. In 1998, Julian Simon was jumping rope on his deck. The phone rang and his wife went upstairs to answer. It was their daughter, Judith, with news that she was pregnant with Julian's first grandchild. A grandchild that was not just one more mouth to feed, but another human with potentially unlimited creative capacity. A brand new human mind added on to the 6 billion of the time. One power to innovate, to identify new problems, and to solve the old ones. Or maybe just one more thing to make life worth living. Not an insect whose primitive cerebral ganglia draws it into a flame to its own death, but a person who can harness that flame to cook, keep their houses, and smell the field with the rocks they dig up. Julian Simon's grandchild would be one more soul in a world that he knew got a little better every day, even when it didn't feel like it. Julian's wife ran down the stairs to give him the great news. She found him dead on the living room floor. He had a heart attack at 65. Paul Ehrlich's population bomb theory was right about butterflies. Since his 1980 bet with Simon, the western monarch butterfly has seen a population reduction of over 95%. Feared forests performing and the milkweed that monarchs feed on flourished. Herbicides to control weeds and crops shrunk available milkweed, and butterfly populations were devastated. But we've responded by doing exactly what Simon said we would, creating a rehabilitation plan that includes planting 1.3 billion milkweed stems through the central migratory flyover. Everyone knows we are mired in problems and the consequences of our progress. But the one way to avoid Armageddon is to think beyond the doom, to resist the siren song of our most basic instincts, and to make use of our one ultimate finite resource. You. And as always, thanks for watching.
That was way too political.
Because it has been agreed by the nations of the world that the Earth can no longer sustain a continuously increasing population, childbearing is herewith forbidden.
were right. And you know what? I'm not even gonna say I told you so. I'm just glad that you finally know. Stop talking now. Okay. Explain. Just like you said. Explain. Peter. You said it was some all-powerful dude living in the clouds. Our creator's nothing like that. It's still a creator. It's fucking Kevin. He was doing the work. He was doing a secret project. Hey, just ask some questions. Power Bound software. Yeah. It's good software. No, that's the opposite of what you said. I think you know you're wrong. You're kind of reaching. But what's nice about this language is that it highlights any individual mistakes in red. So when I was debugging, all I had to do was part the red C code from the rest and then see what the issues were. Then all the bugs were swept away and the good code was free to be executed. Okay. So was there like a flood that covered the entire Earth and a dude who built an ark and put a bunch of animals on it? That was in another file.
Doesn't count. Totally counts.
Doesn't count. Different files. That's like, wait, different folder? Yep, different folder. Different folder. That's like a different universe. The Bible never says it all happened this way.
What?
You
God
people
fucking
crazy. Yeah, my computer, I have one column of final design folders that I actually sent to my teacher. And then I have another column of just junk folders for fun stuff.
Are you trying to say it happened in the parallel universe?
No, I'm just saying different folder. Okay, what happens after you die? You're removed from the active program, but all your info is still stored on an external hard drive.
Why?
Maybe. Yeah, even when someone dies, they still want to be able to access their information. What, you want to know something crazy? Okay, so I was monitoring this one character in the game, speed running through their life. And once they died and went to the external hard drive, I was done for the night, so I unplugged the hard drive and shut off my computer. And I left for a long weekend. And I came back 3 days later, back to the active program. And I swear to God, I never plugged the hard drive back in. It jumped from the hard drive into the computer. I can only describe it as a miracle. A miracle? Yes, exactly. Why? That smirk? You know what? No. You said you were going to go to heaven above the clouds or whatever. Not a hard drive sitting on some dude's desk. So after that, I knew I needed another method of storing these files. So I started backing up the hard drive.
In the cloud.
Cloud, yeah, exactly.
Ah.
Because for certain files, it's apparently too much for the hard drive, and it'll start overheating. So it's kind of like those files are burning forever. Yeah, exactly. Like, at least until they get a better cooling system.
Your storage getting million.
Yeah, well, that's what happens. But I'm very impressed. Well, what'd you get on the project? B-. Wow, strict teacher.
Yeah, for real.
But I'm thankful for what I got. Oh, speaking of that, one second. Dear Lord, I just want to say thank you for guiding me through this project. I managed to get a B-, which is passing. Wait! Are you praying?
Yeah.
To who? God. You have a God? pay for nothing. I don't know, maybe you're part of the simulation. Dumbest thing I've ever heard. Wait, how do you know you guys have a gun? He talks back to us. Hey Kevin, just want to say good job on the senior project. Thanks, I worked really hard on it. I know you did, but maybe don't procrastinate as much next time? Yeah. Okay, wait. Who is your god? Want to see? Yeah. Hey, setting up one of my characters too now. You can do that. I had no idea what was going on. It was a weird trip in my life, man. Oh, wait, are you fucking kidding me? Hi there! What is this? Mormon got it right? Not exactly. Explain. In a way, everyone got it right. Explain more. Hey Kevin, what was that? Yeah, I got it. Alright, so who do you think made him? I don't know, he's God, himself. Right. Shut the fuck up! Oh boy. Yeah. So he has his own God. What, so there's like levels to it? Here, check it out. Hey, sending one up. Like what the fuck?
God.
Really? What the fuck? What up? So what I did was I took the real gods, and I put them in your simulation as real people, as influential characters to your individual religions. In reality, that's not how it works. It's later. Everyone has their creator, and all creators have their nations. Everyone has a purpose. We all live. You wanna know something? The reason I made this program was to test the idea of different religions coexisting on the same planet. Wow, you really fucked us. Yeah, we're just fast enough. I actually ran the simulation to the end of time, and what I found was that when your fundamental goals and beliefs are so different, you guys cannot coexist. There can be improvements. It can be good at times for certain people, but you guys will never live in harmony the way that we did. I mean, we got those cool coexist bumper stickers. And that's a win. Wait, so if there's like a ladder of religions, I feel like we're gonna get to one that is not supposed to make it for you guys, but for us, it's different. Here, sending one up. Fucking knew it. Yo! So Tom Cruise up here too. 3-4,000. Jesus Christ. Somebody close. See, all the influential people from all of your religions can be found somewhere here. Even the agnostics were right in a way. Because if you look at 442, God is in a quantum state of existing and not existing. And for you, 463 has no God. Knew it! There is no God! God level 63. Okay, level 0. Yeah. So wait, does this end? Or is there like a top God or something? I mean, yeah, I got one coming to the top floor. Oh boy. Fuck no. You wanna get in here? I only have one question for you. What color's your Bugatti? The top god will do Andrew Paint. Why paint? Because his head looks like a freshly shaven paint. Maybe go with paint. Alright. And it's done. Hey, you ever think maybe we're in a simulation? Whoa.
Looks like we're doing this the hard way.
This episode will take you on our craziest challenges we created real rackets by playing one versus 4 and then the world's longest serve and more. Let's get into it. Okay, it's gonna be me against 4 with 1 ball. My first victim. Or is it? 1-0. You got that covered. I got to take the ball. Nice. Okay, let's make it harder. He's the transition transition between the greener blocks and the slightly less green blocks in our color palette. So the last one of our copper blocks has reached the weathered copper stage, so we're going to grab that. We're going to cut that in our stone cutter as well, and we'll finally be able to put together the full block palette for this wall. So more or less, this is what we're going to be working with. We start off with some moss. We add a bit of mossy cobblestone and then tuff on top of that. We're going to switch then to weathered cut copper, which is going to be kind of a shift from the greener blocks down here, but we're going to add some vines over the top of that, or at least one block. Then we're going to have some exposed cut copper on the top of that to have that transition between the pinkish green to the greenish pink. From there we can transition into a block of granite, and from there we end up finishing the wall with bricks. And if I hop down here, I think this is honestly a really cool set of transitions. We can even have the vines overlay the tuff blocks a little bit, and that can connect the tuff to the mossy cobblestone even more, whilst also providing a transition between the tuff and the weathered copper. We've got our bricks in there prominently, we've got a layer of granite, and we're not going to make this a linear gradient like we've done in the roofs here. It's not just going to be rows of these blocks identically all the way along. We're going to mix and match the materials in here to imply that the moss has grown up the wall here in more organic patterns and that it's not just sitting at the bottom of the wall curated that way. The idea that the factory has been sort of naturalized or overgrown by the foliage of the area is quite appealing to me, and so I think it's kind of worth mixing in a bunch of the moss and whatnot. Maybe having a couple of areas where the moss hasn't even grown up a certain section of the wall, but maybe have it in the floor instead, and we can start to blend these transitions together, even using leaves over the top if we want to have a bit more 3D to this wall, because it's going to be a big flat wall, but with this amount of texture in it, you're really not going to notice that from a distance. It's going to create such a different impression to a wall that is just made out of flat sections of brick, and this is one of the essential things I think to learn about building in Minecraft, is that there are these kind of painterly brush strokes you can apply to texturing builds, instead of having to make it all out of one type of material. But at this point, in order to complete our wall here and work a little bit more on the wider structure, I'm going to need to wait for more of this copper to age. So I'm going to make sure that we've smelted enough of that, that we can lay out a bunch of copper blocks in its grid, and we'll see what we can do when we've gotten hold of more of it. Okay, with a bit more thought and effort and a little bit more copper, we've now got a wall together, and I've decided to add mud into the mix. Packed mud specifically, because this is actually quite a diverse block. Once we have the regular packed mud in there, we can also change it up if we want to and add some mud bricks to line up with some of the tiled textures that we've got in here from the copper. Not only that, but we can also include some mossy stone bricks in areas that we want to feel a little bit more structural. And I'm planning on pulling a wall out by a block every so often to create a kind of supporting pillar, which can even end up being a factory chimney depending on how we design the rest of the build. Another really important tip for working with copper though, if you have a single block of copper that you know you're going to turn into cut copper, wax it first, because that will preserve the age of that individual copper block, but it will also keep the wax when you cut it into cut copper. So you end up with 4 blocks of waxed, weathered cut copper in this case, instead of having to spend 4 honeycomb waxing it. That will save you on honeycomb if you don't have a substantial farm for the stuff, although right now the farm is absolutely churning out stuff and I have no real use for it besides this. So any blocks of copper that I want to keep in that state, I've been waxing first, then mining, and then cutting in the stone cutter. Another tip to give you in terms of harvesting vines, just to make things a little bit faster, is that vines can actually be harvested quicker if you have a set of shears enchanted with efficiency. Now, if you've done a bit of experimental enchanting already, you'll know that efficiency can't simply be put on shears in an enchantment table. What you need to do instead is gather some efficiency books, and I should have some around here, but maybe I haven't used them all that much. We'll use this one since I'm not interested in having Bane of Arthropods or knockback on anything. Let's add efficiency 4 to these shears. We can also add mending as well, so that the durability on these doesn't matter, because we can just go and repair them at the experience farm. And obviously we can add unbreaking once I've got an unbreaking book available. But you can actually shear vines a lot faster with efficiency, and efficiency 4 is definitely enough to shear these vines instantaneously, meaning that if you're farming them from jungle trees, you can just grab a bunch all at once like this, instead of having to mine them one at a time individually and have that take up a bunch of your time and effort. But now we've got a bunch of copper on the go, and the mud is nice and easy to acquire. We are literally farming it inside the building that we're trying to make right now, and the wheat farm over there is providing enough that we can convert it into packed mud. The next thing to figure out is a source of bricks, and while of course we could end up drying off all of the mud here, turning it into clay, and then smelting the individual clay balls. We can also get bricks from villagers. So we're going to go and pay a visit to a stonemason. The XP that we earn from trading will actually be a really good way of repairing these shears. So we can buy bricks, 10 per emerald, which is actually a really nice way of gathering bricks for blocks. That's 40 blocks of bricks per trading refresh, so we should be able to end up with 120 bricks,
Next
nearly
up,
2 stacks of bricks per
Akala.
day, which is really not too bad when the alternative is making clay yourself or going and digging it all out of riverbeds and lush caves. And there we go, we've got our 2 stacks of bricks from the stonemason. That's enough to keep us going on the factory build for now. Let's head on home. Now we're going to follow the pattern that we've established with some other builds in this area, trying to tie this build in thematically, even though it's using a very different block palette.